welcome back to Witch Daily's countdown to Halloween, big countdown to the Samhain holiday, and getting your witchy feelings going, getting the witchy vibe going for all of us out there as we count down to the big day. Today we are going to do something called making egg salt. Now, egg salt is a safe way of having salt for an outdoor ritual. As you probably already know, if you use salt to cast a circle, which you should use salt to cast a circle, you shouldn't use pure salt outside. That's dangerous for the vegetation, it's dangerous for the land. In fact, the way that the Romans used to conquer people was by salting their fields so that the people would have a really hard time growing anything on their own, and then they'd have to be dependent on the Romans to buy their food instead of growing their own. So you don't want to salt the land that you live on. It's not a very healthy thing. That being said, a tiny bit of salt in water for casting a circle is not a huge deal, but I'm actually a big fan of making egg salt. Can't probably see that very well. Because you can do all kinds of other fun things with it. You can add roses to your egg salt, or you can add lavender to your egg salt. So you can have different things that you add, and it's also a good idea just to add a tiny little pinch of your table salt or kosher salt or sea salt so that you are representing the masculine with your egg salt, because the salt is supposed to represent the masculine, and since we're using eggs, it's kind of feminine. So just bear that in mind as you move forward. Add a little pinch of salt, tiny, not a lot, tiny little pinch of salt. But I'm going to show you how to make the salt. Okay, let's go. So as you get started, you can see I've got egg salt that I've put together. You'll need a mortar and pestle. You need some eggshells. You're going to want to wash your eggshells first and dry them for a couple of days. And then once they're dry, you want to get this little membrane out of there because it doesn't crush very well. So I just typically use a pair of tweezers and just kind of scrape it out and get the little membrane out so that I'm not finding bits and pieces of it in my egg salt when I'm doing the work itself. And just make sure the eggs are dry. You don't want to use wet eggshells in your mortar and pestle, so it will kind of stick and it'll stain and it'll make it hard to get them out, and it'll get stuck in the grooves of your mortar and pestle. You don't want that. So you're just going to grind them down. Use the edges of the mortar and pestle. Those are the parts that are kind of roughed up and made to crush. And it should be really fine, powdery like when you're done. So should take about 15 minutes or so to do a dozen eggshells. And then you'll have wonderful eggshell salt for your circles when you want to hold ritual outside. So as I mentioned before, you want to have this kind of salt for when you want to do ritual outside. You don't want to poison the land that you live on and that grows your food. Even if you don't grow your own food, you still want to keep the soil healthy, and you don't want to oversalt it, especially if you do ritual in the same place all the time. So having calcium salt or egg salt is really, really useful for that. I like to mix it with things for different times of the year. I mentioned lavender and roses, but you can mix it with just about anything that's natural that's going to decompose into the earth. I also highly recommend making it all the time. If you are like me and you eat a lot of eggs, I keep the eggshells. I wash them out after I make scrambled eggs or something like that, or an omelet. And I keep the eggshells. I let them dry out for a couple of days. And every week or so, I just add to my egg salt, because it takes actually quite a bit of eggs to make the egg salt. It's like that little bit that you saw in my jar. And I'll show you again. That's like 2 dozen eggs. I don't know if you can see that, but that's like 2 dozen eggshells right there. It's not a lot, right? So it's probably, probably took me a year to fill this last time. So, if you don't eat eggs every day, especially, you're going to need to just keep the eggshells as often as you can. So highly recommend that you make use of the things that are in your life. It's also another good use for the eggshells is fertilizer for your garden or for your plants. So if you find yourself keeping it but not using it, then just add it to your plants. It's actually a really good source of calcium for them. And crushed up is especially good for them. So there you go. You got some extra egg salt there for your ritual purposes, and you also can use it for your garden or for fertilizer if you need to. Just remember, use dry your eggs out. Use the eggshells really dry. You don't want to put the wet eggshells in your mortar and pestle because it'll gum up your mortar and pestle, make it really hard to use for other things. And it takes a lot of strength to use that mortar and pestle. I also find that it's easier for me to do the Swittershins in the mortar and pestle itself. It just for some reason seems to grind up a lot better. So yeah, now you have a recipe for making your own egg salt, and you can do rituals and cast your circle with salt and water safely out in your garden or outside in nature. All right, have a very witchy day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. If you want to get these in your inbox, make sure to sign up at witchdaily.com, and you'll get them every day in our big countdown to Halloween and all things witchy. Have a very witchy day.